This is something to talk about. We're sponsored by Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island, which offers assisted, independent, and memory care living. To find out about their offerings on Rolling Bay and about day stay and respite care, call 206-594-1010 and check out their website at fieldstonecommunities.com and come by for a tour. Actually, you can come by right now for a free lunch. They're doing a free lunch offer. So call Ashley at 206-594-1010 and say you'd like to come by and sample the Residence Bar and Grill. It's called the Skyline Bar and Grill. Also, we'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people, the people of the clear salt water, the Suquamish tribe, who have lived on these waters and on these lands since time immemorial. We are very grateful for their stewardship, and we are learning from them even today. It's Politics Friday, and that means David Harrison is here. And David, who has been involved in the University of Washington Evans School, has been teaching public policy for years, brings that expertise to our ears and eyes once a month. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Read et al. I'm on my phone because Xfinity is down. So that means if somebody's got a question, I can't see you. So you'll either have to speak or Reed will have to recognize you. I'll do my usual 3 stops, but if you have questions, thoughts, concerns, insights, or insults in the course of my talk, then somebody's going to have to speak up because I can't see you. I can't see you all. Our 3 topics today, as you may know, are our usual topic of Trump's legal issues, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Mike Johnson and what's going to happen with Marjorie Taylor Greene trying to unseat him yet again. And then we'll talk a little bit about election strategy for November, especially for the House, which we tend to forget about with all the big high-profile Senate races. First, I want to tell you that with regard to Kristi Noem's problem, the governor of South Dakota who wanted to be Trump's vice presidential candidate, but who wrote a book saying that she shot her dog. Donald Trump would shoot your dog Fido in a second. So the whole joke about MAGA mourning this dog, I have to tell you that MAGA slowing down the Ukraine resolution and the weaponry for Zelensky killed about 4,000 or 5,000 soldiers. So I'm here to tell you that mourning over, nothing against mourning over a dog, except they should be mourning over their Putin love instead. Of course, if somebody said Trump shot a dog, which he shot, he'd say, I never met that dog. And then he'd say, I didn't meet that dog because that dog's not my type of dog. Then he'd say it was a hoax. Then he'd say it was Nancy Pelosi who shot the dog, or maybe Nikki Haley. And then and only then would Sam Alito say that even if he did shoot the dog, there would be immunity for shooting the dog because we don't want a lot of people charging presidents for shooting dogs, and that would be what would transpire. I want to make a side reference that will seem a little peculiar as we get into Trump's legal problems. When I taught at the University of Washington, I taught policy analysis, and in that endeavor, if you're thinking of a new idea for government, you got to predict the results of your intervention. So say a student was worried about the aquifer underneath Kitsap County and its performance and its ability to give us water for the next 60, 80, 100 years. The student would come up with an idea, and it would be to get everybody to use low-flow shower heads, which would save so much water that it'd almost be worth it for the city of Bainbridge Island to go door to door and install that low flow shower had, the water savings would be immense. If a student did a paper and said, would this be effective, and said yes or no, I would give the paper back to them, because the issue, as it is with Trump's legal problems, is not whether Trump's legal problems are bad for him, yes or no. It's the extent to which they are. So if you read a reporter who says there's been no impact on Trump's support of his legal problems, stop reading that reporter, because it isn't true. The issue is whether the impact will be significant and the extent to which it will be significant over the course of between now and November. And that's a big hope, of course, for Democrats, but it's a reasonable hope, given that 50% of independents, 25% of Republicans say it's problematic for the president to be convicted, ex-president to be convicted of a felony. So the reporters are saying only 25% of Republicans. That's a huge number for people to reconsider whether they're voting for someone over a felony conviction, which seems certain to be in the cards. So I'm just saying, let's consider this situation. Going for Joe Biden significantly are people's worries that Trump will not adhere to the Constitution, plus the whole choice issue, as we've proven already, is a big winner for us. Going against the President Biden's reelection are immigration and famously inflation, which even though it's at 3.5%, almost every American thinks it's at 10. And so far, we haven't really been able to change their mind on that, or at least the minds of a significant number. So that's our situation as we walk into these cases. The belief, even if fewer of them are pursued between now and November than we initially hoped, and we went over this on this talk, that enough will be happening that will significantly affect the desire of independents and Republicans to vote for Trump. And again, it would just have to be the kind of effect choice has, 4 or 5%, or even less, for it to change the outcome of the election. So I want to briefly go over the 7 separate legal actions, and then I'm going to give 4 awards to these cases. So bear with me and I'll run through them with an emphasis on where it goes from here and what I predict. So as you know, Letitia James, Attorney General of the State of New York, won a civil lawsuit against Trump for $454 million for inflating the values of property for insurance purposes. I mean, for to get loans and deflating for taxes, fraudulent behavior. And the $454 million is calculated on basically what he gained from doing that. The legal issue going forward is these consumer fraud kinds of charges usually have an obvious consumer victim. So you got charged $1 too much for your whole kernel of corn. In this case, the prosecutors say, even though he did not default on the loans, that the victim is the banks for what they would have otherwise charged Donald Trump if he had lied. And I expect that will prevail. But that's the legal issue on appeal, federal appeal, I'm sorry, state appeal, to a 5-judge panel that will review whether the $454 million is excessive and maybe sidle up to the issue of whether the trial outcome should be overruled. It's very unlikely that they would reverse the judgment, and very and quite possible that they would reduce the $450 million, which, as you know, would not be any big problem for us. You can pay $300 million and it would be fine. Secondly, we have the E. Jean Carroll case. That's in a even better situation than Letitia James, because it was not reported on so much, but last week a federal district court judge denied Trump's appeal, said it was baseless, without merit. And so the issue there is Trump doesn't have any basis under which he's going to believe that the federal appellate court would reverse, or that the Supreme Court would hear the defamation case from New York State, where there's no present immunity claim, because the case turned around times when Trump wasn't in office, and or did not raise the claim appropriately. So at any rate, we're good to go on Jean Carroll getting her money, and that'll get reported on eventually, and will stand on Trump's record. Third, of course, we have the existing case with Alvin Bragg, which is going well. We now have a tape introduced into evidence where Trump and Michael Cohen are talking about paying off the Playboy model Karen McDougal, and Trump is saying pay her in cash. So Trump is associated with this behavior. We also have a bizarre email on the election night that many of us will remember for our whole lives, 2016, where the executives at National Enquirer who took down Stormy Daniels' claims after Trump won are emailing each other and saying, "What have we done?" Which is a good thing to think about in advance. At any rate, that trial is going okay. The thing to remember is Hope Hicks of Trump's staff is a witness for the prosecution. She was there at some meetings where the strategy of keeping people quiet was discussed. And then Stormy Daniels herself will be a witness. So I think the jury, whether the jury gets to be a hung jury or not, the jury is going to believe, after Stormy Daniels is done, that Donald Trump had a relationship short term with Stormy Daniels. So that will go on. And the trouble with all these possible appeals for Donald Trump, as you will remember, is there has to be a claim for why the charges should be, why the sentence or finding of guilt should be overturned or reversed. You just don't. We're so fond of saying this is going to be appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, of thinking that these appeals are willy-nilly. But as we proved, as was proven during all the 50 or so election lawsuits that Trump filed, there are a lot of cases where courts refused to hear the appeal because there was no basis for the appeal. And you'll find that to be the case here as well. I don't personally care if Trump goes to jail or not. I just think that it would be appropriate to convict him of a felony where he performed felonious acts. The big buzz, of course, is the Supreme Court talking about whether there's total immunity. Excuse me. As you know, they're not going to find that there's total immunity for every action. If you were following those arguments, know that the justices that have been on the court the longest get to go first with their questions. So when Thomas and Alito start going, you start thinking, boy, this shows the trend on the court. The issue is this: the Supremes are not going to agree with the appellate court that there's no immunity. They're too worried that presidents in the future will get randomly prosecuted. They're going to create some kind of zone of partial immunity for official acts. And that's what they're gonna do. They got 5 votes to do it. They're gonna do it. The issue is how they do it and what they do about um, non-official acts, acts done outside of the official status of the president. And that, as you know, is the series of questions Amy Coney Barrett asked about whether they were outside the zone of immunity because they were actions that would be taken not in the president's as part of the president's official duties. And she asked some specifics having to do, well, if a president talked to lawyers about how to create false electors, would that be an official act? And the attorney for Trump ended up saying, you know, we dispute the facts on that claim, but no, it would not be an official act. So what Amy Coney Barrett's going to do is get 5 votes saying there is no immunity at all for actions outside of official acts. And she can get 5 votes even if Kavanaugh and Gorsuch don't come along. The issue, of course, as you know, is whether those are 5 votes that remand to the appellate court to figure out how to run the definitions, or whether they let Jack Smith pursue the case in Judge Chutkan's court because he's got plenty of claims that there were actions outside the official duties of the president. He could run a trial with those limitations and would. So the issue is not so much whether they're going to do that, well, they will, but how they do it, because obviously there are those people that would like to have this happen between now and November. So that gives rise to just. I don't know that that's a question. What was that?
It was the internet coming back on over here.
Oh, no. Judge Chutkan's case then is the big case on what happened on January 6th and with election fraud. And she would like to do that in August. She's still able to do in August. She doesn't have a lot of motions to sort out. It's just whether, or September, it's just whether the Supreme Court remands in such a way that it makes it that impossible. There's a lot of the press who says that's inevitable. I don't think so. I think it's possible there'll be a case in September. Then the other 2 cases, as you know, Fani Willis, the history of humankind is replete with people who have done things, start wars and such, over love and or sex or both. And so Fani Willis, for the time being, is messed up a wonderful, though complex case with 19 defendants by her relationship with her contracted prosecutor. And it's not going to be fixed between now and November. There's no way she'll get that trial started between now and then, even though she will be reelected because it's Fulton County. And then lastly, and interestingly, and I'm going to give an award on this, is Eileen Kern, who's the federal district court judge for the classified documents case. Here there are motions pending, but interestingly, Jack Smith has argued for a trial date in July, and Trump's forces initially said August of this year. And then they amended and said, of course, it shouldn't be this year at all. But it's quite possible that Eileen Cannon will do it this year. There is the liberal press is saying if she doesn't, the appellate court might remove her from the case. I think not. That's just a liberal dream. I think she'll do it depending on what she decides on the dispute right now, where she wants to give instructions to the jury or is thinking about it. citing the Presidential Records Act when Jack Smith has, in creating the possibility that the jury could find that Trump had some legal ability to instantly classify and take those records, whereas Jack Smith wants the jury instructions to be about the Espionage Act under which Trump is charged. But that could be resolved, and we could see a trial in September or nestled in with the other Chutkan federal trial. So that's the 7 cases. So now my awards, and then I'll ask for questions or thoughts. We have a little less time today, so we're doing fine. It's about 2. Excuse me. The award for this is going to happen for sure is the E. Jean Carroll award of $80 million or so. Trump's got nowhere to go on this. The last state action was on the amount of the award, not on whether he defamed E. Jean Carroll. The federal appellate judge said that the appeal is meritless. He's got nowhere to go. He's posted a bond. He's going to have to pay the money. The second award, more significantly more likely than you think, is my theory about Amy Coney Barrett. She and John Roberts are institutionalists. What they don't want is the claim for which they are presently suspected of purposely delaying this legal action till after the election. Amy Coney Barrett and Roberts still want the court to be seen as the fair arbiter of such issues. And the way in their, at least in her sensibility to do that, would be allow Jack Smith to go forward on the charges of what Trump did as a private citizen. I'm going to have to go get a glass of water. I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, that would, if true, that would show that there's still some statesmanship somewhere in this country. It sometimes feels like it's a little hard to find statesmanship, but maybe Judge Coney Barrett is, well, sort of. I mean, John Roberts has been talking about this, although he's had less effectiveness. He's been talking about the idea of the importance of the support for the court, and it's interesting that that's where she's coming down.
And it's possible that the two of them talked about it. I don't know. But it was definitely an intentional and well orchestrated line of questioning. And Trump had to wonder about it, because for the defense attorney to have any credibility at all, you remember all this stuff about could SEAL Team X execute the political opponent. That attorney for Trump couldn't say that sending fraudulent electors was an official act. He just couldn't. So war number 3, what we have screwed up is ghost of Fani Willis. It's too bad. And then the real sleeper, I think, is the possibility that the press doesn't believe that Judge Eileen Cannon will move forward on basically what is an open and shut case of him not only securing and collecting and utilizing, but refusing to give back classified documents and fraudulently claiming that he didn't have them. So that's the legal report for today. Questions, thoughts, concerns before we turn briefly to our other 2 topics?
I have something that I'd like to say. Could I? My question would be, how long is it going to do until Marshawn decides to do something more than $1,000 for every roof up by Trump?
It's really interesting because Trump wants to continue to do what he's doing, and Marchand doesn't want him to continue to do what he's doing. At a certain stage, Trump is trying to integrate his regular Truth Social posts with his campaign strategy. He's spending so much time in court, he has to have a campaign strategy that it's all part of a Democratic cabal and so forth. So he has to have that because he's going to sit there for another month. But at some point, Marchand's going to have to jail him. And as it turns out, that's not a good strategy for Trump. You'd think, well, that's just an extension of his present strategy. It really isn't. It's a bad look to be hauled off to jail. He doesn't want a bad look. So he's trying to, I don't know. I mean, Marchand's in a corner because Trump has showed no signs of stopping. So I don't know how that's going to work, but I think eventually there'd have to be, he'd have to book him. So we'll see. That would be wonderful, amazing, weird.
But the problem, David, with that is he would look like a martyr if he went to prison.
Look like what?
He would look like a martyr.
No, I don't think so. I think he would look like, I mean, sure, to some. So that would be his hope, but I think on balance, Americans don't want their presidential candidates to be. I would guess it would be a net negative. That would be my thinking. Other questions on lawsuits? We'll move
My
on to-
question is related to sort of what Sheila was saying, that you have earlier said that you feel as though whenever it's your judgment that should Trump be convicted and maybe even just be in the news for all of these charges, and certainly if he's taken to jail, it's going to help peel off Republicans or supporters that are questioning it, so that base may be riled up, as Sheila says, but it's also going to shrink. What do you think about
Yeah,
that?
so I think the polls are pretty clear on that. The press has reported reverse. So when I read the polls, it says 50% of independents and 25% of Republicans think that it's significant when someone is convicted of a felony, and will take that into consideration and have it influence their vote. The presses say only, and I'm saying, boy, that's a big number. It doesn't mean that all that people who are telling registered voters who are telling the pollster that that's a factor for them. Obviously, it doesn't mean all of them would have it be the dominant factor or the only factor or determine the outcome. It's just that's a big, scary number if you're running for president and if a race is very close. So, yes, I am thinking that if there is a felony in a criminal court, even the lesser charge that he's undergoing now, combined with the salaciousness of the charges, the presence of Hope Hicks and Stormy Daniels on the stand, that could be as significant as the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and could absolutely sway the election. Sheila's issue about being a martyr, I don't know. I know there are a lot of independents that Joe Biden won that were just tired of the story. They're tired of Donald Trump's thing. So we'll see. They're also tired of inflation. So we'll see. Or immigration. Any other things on this front before we talk briefly about Mike Johnson? There I go again. No wonder he can't get votes if I keep on getting his name wrong. So as you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to bring up unseating him as speaker. But as you also know, when Kevin McCarthy was unseated, all the Democrats, under the guidance of Hakeem Jeffries, voted with the renegade Republicans to unseat him. It's always traditional to vote for your guy as speaker. So it's votes for Hakeem Jeffries. I mean, if they did that now, he might win. But this is a vote up or down on Mike Johnson. And after Hakeem Jeffries watched a few of his members saying, if he does the right thing on Ukraine, I'll vote to protect him. They weren't doing that, risking their relationship to Hakeem Jeffries. He was letting them do that. And he was just biding his time. The reason he was biding his time is he didn't know what Mike Johnson was going to do, either on the budget resolution or on Ukraine. So he figured he'd wait. The implicit, not announced deal that has now been executed is you get the budget resolution, bipartisan, and $60 billion from Ukraine, and we will save your speakership. So it's often reported that that was the deal. Remember, it goes both ways. That is, we will do it if you pass it, but his deal was, I will do it if you will support me. And both sides had to be confident. So on one side, Mike Johnson does it, gets the money for Ukraine, and Hakeem Jeffries still doesn't support him, and he gets thrown out like Kevin McCarthy. So he had to have assurances that support would come, and then of course, Hakeem Jeffries wasn't going to save his speakership till he saw the money for Ukraine. Meanwhile, of course, Mike Johnson has to go see Trump, get his permission, and put in this little loan fee that doesn't amount to very much, collection of Russian assets, all to make it a little bit more palatable and get half the Republicans to vote for it. What is amazing is poor Ronald Reagan's bones are rolling over and over. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Mr. Putin, do what you want to Ukrainians. It's amazing. It's not explained by isolationism, which we had back with Lend-Lease in 1940 when Roosevelt helped save Great Britain. It's beyond that, I think. I think there's a love of a little grudging, maybe even a little significant love of authoritarianism, and that there's a little bromance with Putin going on, which is astonishing. Anyway, so as you know, he's saved. Now, what will happen between now and November? Almost nothing, but keep in mind that they need another budget resolution in September, and the far right of Johnson's caucus will rebel, and they'll say we're not supportive of this budget resolution, and Mike Johnson will have to cut one more deal with Hakeem Jeffries to get a budget in September to not close down the government so that they can all go and have a vote in November. Questions on this front? Remember, legislation gets very exciting next year because when they passed the not very good tax bill in Trump's era, they left certain things to expire next year. There has to be a bill in 2025. They left to expire the upper tax rate, the big standard deduction, and the state taxes, and a whole bunch of business taxes. So there has to be a bill next year, and that'll make it a legislative year, whoever wins. So I have one more brief topic. I'm going to take another drink of water. So what does this look like for the November election? You remember in other years, Democrats would have a better chance, especially of winning the Senate, because of certain candidates, Trump and others would push forward. So monumentally, that was Herschel Walker who still did pretty well. He got 48%, but you could argue that there were any number of Republicans prepared to beat Raphael Warnock, and that they keep on losing because we fought so hard for Warnock and because football players aren't automatically great senators unless you don't care about the actual role of legislating. So there's been efforts this year by the House Congressional Campaign Committee and Senate to make sure they don't have that kind of obvious, well, we would have a chance, but this is somebody, who's been arrested a few times or who's made a false claim. Or so Republicans have removed 3 or 4 people that they think have kept them from being nominated, that they think would have a harder time. But there are still examples of that. Southwest Michigan being a huge one. Marie Glusenkamp Perez would get beat any day by somebody close to a moderate Republican. But they are nominated Joe Kent again, who was the one who wanted to execute Fauci. So that gives her a much better chance. And in Arizona, that's the issue with Kari Lake. Kari Lake is running against Mike Gallego, who is ahead by 4 points or so now. If that was more of a centrist Republican, that would be a real race. And it might still be, but that's why Kari Lake reversed direction on the 1868 Arizona abortion law. But I think she's already been a part of Trump's January 6th defenses and frauds enough so that I think it'd be hard for her to win. The interesting thing about that then becomes when you let candidates like that run in swing states, does that increase the chance that Democrats will win Arizona, along with the fact that abortion's on the ballot? And the answer is yes. So that's disappointing to Trump. Arizona's a key state. If Biden won the old blue wall, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, unless he unexpectedly lost another swing state, all he would have to do to win the election would be win Arizona. And the same is true for Nevada. Jackie Rosen, who's the Democratic senator, is 10 points ahead, and choice will be on the ballot. So if you're Joe Biden, if you're Hakeem Jeffries, you think this is setting up not too badly to win back the House. If you're Joe Biden, you're happy that Arizona and Nevada are going to have choice on the ballot, and that your senatorial candidates are looking good. In neither case is the governor up. One last little data point, which is interesting. A lot of us follow what's called the generic congressional vote. Those are polls that say to people, regardless of who your specific congressperson is, do you intend to vote for the Democrat or the Republican in your congressional race? And that gets you the generic vote. At the start of this year, Republicans were ahead by about 1.5% in the average generic poll. And now the Democrats are ahead by 1, a little bit more than 1. That's a 2.5 point shift of the average. And that basically is tracking the public's dislike for the bizarre behavior of the House Republican caucus. So that means actually the Democratic generic vote is polling a little ahead of Biden, who is still weighted down by age, immigration, and inflation. So that's not such a bad deal to have the House vote be +1 or so. To be sure to, because of the concentration of Democrats, to win back the House, you'd want that to be +2 at least, because we roll such big margins in the cities. any rate, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Questions, thoughts, concerns?
Oh, Sheila and I have one. Sheila, you want to go first?
Yeah, I just want to know who you think is going to run, going to be Trump's vice presidential candidate.
Well, it's interesting because you'd think J.D. Vance, because he
Oh.
wasn't always a Trump, but it won't be because the abortion vote was held last year. Trump's not going to lose Ohio, so it wouldn't be J.D. Vance. I don't think. I don't think it'd be a Floridian, because I don't think even with abortion on the ballot, they think that, well, they could do Rubio. That'd be interesting. Rubio said a lot of mean things about Trump, but it could be. I don't
It's
know.
not going to be Governor Nome.
What?
Governor Nome with her cricket.
No way. She's done. Steve Bannon says she's done. She's done. Once you shoot the dog, I mean, you can't shoot a dog and be president. You can cause 6,000 Ukrainian soldiers.
And her goat too. The goat
What?
The goat also got killed.
Yeah, the goat.
Maybe
she's
not
trying to
quite.
revise that story into one of personal heroism, but it's not unless you arm the dog.
So, Kathy, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I was wondering what David thinks about the Washington State GOP convention.
It's interesting. I've met Reichert a couple times, and as you know, Dave Reichert was a public servant, sheriff, and then a congressman. I think it proves that the Republican Party is so split that that they can't win statewide until they get together again. So the non-Reichert forces or Semi Bird took over the convention, and Semi Bird is unelectable. So I think if you're, there was a generation of Republican electeds, of which Reichert is a part, that were not traditional Dan Evans Republicans and are not Semi Bird Republicans. And Rob McKenna personified that. When he ran against Gregoire and almost won, he had been a very serious attorney general. He'd been an effective King County Council member. The problem was having to, I'm going to get my years mixed up. Yeah, I am. He had to adhere to that other wing of the party more than was politically acceptable to him, and he had to try and do the dance. Same
Kind
for
of looks
Chris
to me like it's an example of the terrible damage that Trump has done to the electability of Republicans all down the
and
ballot.
that's one argument, and that's why I was so surprised after January 6th that they gathered around him, and of course Nikki Haley tried to dent that. What's going on is more than, back when I worked for the Republican governor of Michigan, there was such a thing as retribution. And at that time, Ronald Reagan changed the Michigan Republican Party, and the supporters of my governor, Bill Milliken, they gave way to a new Republican Party. And those folks in Michigan are now seen as liberals, but they were Reagan conservatives. At any rate, there is such a thing as presidents taking over parties. What is uncommon, much more than Reagan, is Reagan was a much bigger tent Republican, and even though Reagan had killed Bill Milliken's support base in Michigan, they spoke. And in Trump's case, the reason he was able to get back in is that he would have MAGA supporters seek vengeance on people who had walked away from him. So that's what has happened. And that's why he's running. If Nikki Haley was running, she'd be 8 points ahead of Joe Biden right now because Joe Biden's 81. And but they didn't make that choice.
And Rita, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was wondering, David, do you still think that there's going to be somebody other than Biden running as a Democrat? Because you keep saying you don't think Biden's going to run. I keep hearing. So
You got me. That was somebody else. That wasn't me. You may be thinking of my twin cousin, David Harrison,
yeah,
who
no, I
insisted
don't
last
think
year that
so.
Biden wouldn't be the candidate. And Reed called him on it, and I'm the new David Harrison. No, I want, unless Biden falls over, he's the candidate.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. I used to work for Maria Cantwell, and we just saw her in the airport in Detroit coming back from the eclipse. She was going to an event out there. And I asked her about Biden. She's, very matter of fact about it. If she feels any dismay, she's not saying it to me. And that's true. A lot of electeds, they're not saying it's a problem. And he's done better than I thought. But yes, I thought for sure that either he would be moved aside or he would move aside. And I wish to hell that had happened. David Brooks wrote a column in October saying that we shouldn't want it to happen because of Joe Biden's name recognition and such. I think if by now we were deciding on Whitmer or somebody, we would be in much better shape. Running against Trump would be harder running against Haley. I think 55-year-old Democratic governor would be ahead of Trump and would have built the name recognition. But I do also feel very positive about November. I think all these court cases will add up and that we will prevail.
And you
And the
think
thing I wanted to ask about was so South Dakota and Missouri may still also be voting, maybe in November, on abortion issues.
What'd
don't
you
know
say,
how-
Boo?
South Dakota and Missouri,
Yeah.
there are initiatives because there are strict abortion restrictions in those states. There have been initiatives to try to change the constitutions.
Yeah, there's a running list of who's going to make it on the ballot. I always watch it for swing states, in this case, Florida, Nevada, Arizona. I don't know about South Dakota. The reason why Donald Trump changed to this states' rights argument is that he's worried about the power of choice, especially in these states that are giving slim attention to rape, incest, and the life of the mother. So I think you could have the same result in South Dakota as you did in Kansas. I think citizens didn't want the Dobbs decision, and that's what they're voting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
We'll be back on the widescreen next time.
Yes, David is the founder and executive director of the Northwest Policy Center at the University of Washington, and we are very grateful for your continued engagement with us, both in these live sessions and then we, as everyone knows, post them and folks watch them later. Thank you and have a good weekend.